On Monday, August 24th, 2015, a post was made on Fnaf 4's Steam community page. A post that, for many, signaled the end of the then one-year-old Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. In the post, Cawthon talked about how the lore of his original games had been solved fairly quickly by theorists, but that Fnaf 4's story had remained unsolved since the start, perhaps going unsolved to this day. This post felt like one last goodbye from Scott, urging fans to take a closer look into the story, until he made like 10 more games. Look, we all know it's been a while since the beginning of Five Nights at Freddy's. This franchise has been going strong for 11 good years at this point, and it isn't showing signs of stopping. But even as the lore of the games keeps getting more and more fleshed out with each new release, fans still theorize about the beginning of the franchise, namely its first 6 mainline games. Today, I want to look back at the first original trilogy of the Fnaf series, consisting of, you guessed it, Fnaf 1, Fnaf 2, and Fnaf 3. Were these games ever really solved, like Scott said? What consensus did the community come to back in those early years? What valuable information have we as theorists learned since then? And if we solved everything back in the 2010s, are these games even worth talking about anymore? Those are the questions I'm going to answer today. I'm Withered Circle, and this is the ultimate retrospective of the original Fnaf games lore. Let's start at the beginning. Five Nights at Freddy's came out on August 8, 2014, and after less than a month became a viral breakout success online, with huge Let's Players like Markiplier playing the game shortly after its release. The game's story, extracted from newspapers and the phone calls, seemed pretty cut and dry. At some point in the 1980s, a man killed 5 kids in a famous pizza joint and then got arrested. Those dead kids ended up possessing the pizzeria's animatronics and now tried to kill its night guard. But as you and I both know, that's not where it ended. Eventually, Fnaf's success became so huge that it reached the desk of Matpat, the host of Game Theory. A short while before Halloween, Matt ran a poll asking the community whether they wanted a Halloween special on Slender, the 8 Pages, or this new indie horror game called Five Nights at Freddy's. While Fnaf obviously won, I do imagine what it would be like if Matpat had made a Slender theory instead. Who knows, maybe I'd be a Slender theorist. Anyway, back on track. After the poll results came in, Game Theory released the first ever major Five Nights at Freddy's theory. This was the first stepping stone into a hell that Matpat would never recover from. This theory analyzed the game's lore, story, and environment to come to several conclusions, one of them being that the player, Mike Schmidt, was the murderer that killed those 5 kids, and is reliving a nightmare about Freddy Fazbear's as punishment from his victims. The theory also identified aspects of the game like the mysterious Golden Freddy, the hallucinations, and the history of Fazbear Entertainment. But the last, thrilling, genius conclusion is one that's remembered to this day.
1993, Aurora, Colorado. 10 p.m. Tuesday night at a local Chuck E. Cheese. After a family birthday party runs long, manager Margaret Kohlberg and teenage employees Sylvia Crowell, Ben Grant, Colleen O'Connor, and Bobby Stevens are forced to stay late to close up shop. Surviving the attack, Bobby was able to go to trial and be a damning piece of evidence in the case against Nathan Dunlap, ultimately leading to his...
Oh no. Turns out the Game Theory team had decided to compare the Silly Bear game to a real-life 1993 tragedy at a Chuck E. Cheese's in Colorado. Nice move, Matpat. Right off the bat, Fnaf theorizing was in a rough spot. But it didn't end there. This first theory gained huge viewership and inspired a wave of speculation around the game. At the time, there were 3 big mysteries the prehistoric Fnaf theorists wanted to solve. First, when the game and the events described took place. Second, the identity of the mysterious Golden Freddy, and lastly, the culprit of the infamous bite of 87. The Game Theorist's first video actually answered that first question pretty quickly. In it, Matpat used minimum wages in the US and the paycheck the player gets at the end of Night 5 to calculate when the game took place, landing on 1993, just like the real-world incident he compared the game to. Ever since then, this has been the definitive conclusion, and has probably stayed correct to this day. But the next 2 questions were where theorists started getting confused. In that first video, Matt stated that Golden Freddy was the 5th victim on that fateful night, as well as the suit Mike wore to kill the kids. But since he was drawing comparisons to the real-life incident, Matpat concluded that the 5th victim, who had survived in the real case, had survived in-universe as well, becoming a ghost that haunted Mike, reminding him of his past sins. This is where some of the prehistoric theorists started disagreeing with Matpat. First off, it wasn't very clear if Mike Schmidt was actually the killer. He seemed like a random night guard who just agreed to a job he shouldn't have. Back then, theories on the identity of the killer were mixed, even though Mike being the killer was a theory the majority of fans believed in. Secondly, why would a victim that survived act so paranormally? Surely this fifth kid would have to possess this Golden Freddy suit, right? So back then, it seemed the common consensus was that Golden Freddy was the fifth victim of the murders, but the cause for his powers was unclear. Theorists noticed that the Night 5 phone call, believed to be spoken by Golden Freddy, since his jumpscare was last on Night 4's call, sounded like distorted, reversed speech. When the audio was restored, you could hear a narration of a book called Autobiography of a Yogi. I looked into it, but I couldn't find anyone who came to a conclusion or theory about this back then. But one thing worth noting is that ever since then, FNAF fans have reversed every single distorted audio they've ever gotten. Keep that in mind for later. The third and final of the big original mysteries was the Bite of 87, an event that was mentioned only once, in passing, by Phone Guy. Right away, fans pointed at the two most likely culprits, Freddy Fazbear himself and Foxy the Pirate. Freddy was a strong candidate because of the handprint on his head and the poster of him in the west hall corner that showed him ripping off his own head. Foxy was also pointed at because of his unhinged jaw and the out of order sign outside Pirate's Cove. The prehistoric theorists mostly settled on Foxy for the time being, but they wouldn't really get more evidence until November of 2014. But we'll get there. Anyway, the common consensus the community had about FNAF 1 was that either some guy killed 5 kids in the 80s, possibly in 1987, got himself arrested and was now being tortured by their ghosts, or that the 5 kids had died and were just haunting a random night guard. Aspects of these two theories even made it into the Living Tombstone's classic FNAF 1 song, "We've been all alone, stuck in our little zone, since 1987. As for Golden Freddy and the Bite, those were more unclear, but as we'll see, when FNAF 2 rolled around, the FNAF theory scene really evolved. But before I go insane, I'd like to announce that this video is sponsored by MantaSleep. MantaSleep is a sleep mask company that makes masks that actually work. I recently got the MantaSleep sound mask, and let me tell you, as a FNAF theorist that probably reads comments and watches theory videos a little bit too much, a break from the never-ending stream of light bombarding my eyes is very much needed. MantaSleep's masks are versatile, completely adjustable, and give you 100% darkness when you sleep, meaning you can become just as blind as the average Mike victim believer from the comfort of your own home. The sound mask also comes with really cool adjustable Bluetooth headphones, meaning that not only can you see the POV of Bite victim after 1983, but you can also listen to your favorite content while you're in bed. It just makes falling asleep easier. The mask is super comfortable and can also be used if you sleep on your side, like me. It's easy to wear, clean, and is perfect for recovering from watching a 2-hour-long video essay on the secret lore of some random FNAF spin-off game. My point is, the mask is just good. You can use my code WITHERED for 10% off your next MantaSleep purchase. Thanks again to MantaSleep for sponsoring this video. Before we start looking into the history of FNAF theorizing post-FNAF 2, I wanted to take a look at the post that prompted me to make this video, so you understand what I'm even talking about. This post, from mid-2015, was made shortly before the release of FNAF 4's Halloween edition, and went over some things fans could expect in that DLC. But the bit that's really important is what Scott says about the lore up until that point. You know, when I released the first game over a year ago, I was amazed at how quickly everyone found every bit of lore and story. Then the same thing happened with Part 2. Fans and YouTubers dug in and found everything. Game Theory did an incredible video on Part 2, getting almost everything right. Then Part 3 came out, and once again the story was uncovered by the community. It seemed that there was nothing I could hide. But then, I released Part 4, and somehow, no one, not a single person, found the pieces. The story remains completely hidden. I guess most people assumed that I filled the game with random Easter eggs this time. I didn't. What's in the box? It's the pieces put together. But the bigger question is, would the community accept it that way? The fact that the pieces have remained elusive this time strikes me as incredible and special, a fitting conclusion in some ways, and because of that, I've decided that maybe some things are best left forgotten. Forever. I'll be coming back to the post, so keep it in mind going forward. The reason I bring it up now, and not earlier or later, is because FNAF 2 has a lot of layers to its story, development, and how fans perceived it day one. So, without further ado, let's get right into the next part of the video, FNAF's sequel prequel. Given the first game's massive success, Scott decided to tease the sequel with a trailer and a series of teasers on scottgames.com, which soon became the dedicated website for FNAF teasers and sneak peeks. The first proper look fans got was obviously the trailer, and already speculation began. I'm sure you all know the basic plot of FNAF 2, so I don't need to reiterate it here, but as soon as theorists saw the withered animatronics, they instantly assumed FNAF 2 was a sequel to the first game. This trailer also gave us arguably the funniest FNAF theory of all time. The trailer for FNAF 2 started with a cinematic pan of the FNAF 2 restaurant with an old nursery rhyme, London Bridge is falling down, playing in the background. Since the prehistoric FNAF theorists still had reverse audio brain rot from the autobiography of a Yogi incident, the first thing they did was, of course, reverse the song. And what they got shocked them to the core. When reversed, the song's lyrics morphed into Mike Kill All, just like Mike Schmidt from the first game. Matpat was right. Somehow, Scott Cawthon had time traveled to 19th century England and composed the nursery rhyme himself, knowing that future fans would love his masterful craft and really appreciate— Okay, I can't even keep this going anymore. This was really stupid. But regardless of how legitimate these early theories were, there's no denying this kind of attention was exactly what the franchise needed. With the release of more and more cryptic teasers and finally the release of FNAF 2 in November of 2014, just months after the original game, the theorizing stage exploded in popularity. The game was full of more phone guy lore drops, 8-bit death minigames, questionable gameplay decisions, and, of course, the dramatic twist that the game had been a prequel all along. This is when the prehistoric FNAF theorists evolved into something more. The r/Five Nights At Freddy subreddit grew, hundreds of theorists on YouTube popped up, more Let's Plays were published, and, of course, a new game theory was released all about FNAF 2. Matpat had obviously regretted his last theory, and branched out into a more grounded telling of the franchise's story, tackling most of FNAF 2's story beats and lore revelations. This is the theory that Scott said got almost everything right. So what was it about? What did Matpat say about FNAF 2 that Scott acknowledged was almost entirely correct? That's right, Matt said the commonly known fact that Phone Guy was the purple guy from the 8-bit minigames, the legendary man behind the slaughter who had started it all. But why? Before we get into that, let's take a look at the other conclusions Matpat came to. Conclusions that pretty much hold true to this day. One of the first things he calls out in that video is the existence of 4 Freddy's locations. The one from FNAF 1, the one from FNAF 2, one before either of those, and the first ever mysterious location, Fredbear's Family Diner. Matpat goes on to tie Fredbear's to the Save Him minigame and the possession of the puppet, placing that kid's death at the beginning of the timeline. According to him, this event caused the owners of Fredbear's to sell out their establishment to Fazbear Entertainment. Not perfect, but so far really close. Matpat then goes on to explain that the missing children incident was done by a killer wearing a Golden Freddy suit, but that the kids were stuffed into the animatronics by the puppet. This is pretty accurate to the beliefs at the time, but as we'll see, things have changed since then. But what did Matpat think of the FNAF 2 minigames?
The old animatronics have been retired, and the cute new versions of all our favorite friends come equipped with facial recognition software that just so happens to be connected to a sex offender database.
Matpat, no! Matt pieced together the facial recognition story pretty simply, and theorized that the 5 kids we see in the Save Them minigame are a set of new kids. So far, so good. But then he makes the claim that's stuck to this franchise for a decade by now, that the purple guy is the phone guy from FNAF 1 and 2. The evidence? Well, first off, Matt claimed that since Phone Guy was a security guard, the purple guy sprite from Save Them lined up well, and was even holding a phone. Purple Guy smiles when he sees Foxy perform to the dead kids, and holds a position in the company similar to Phone Guy. He's also distrustful of the puppet, just like Phone Guy, and of course, the animatronics get their revenge on FNAF 1's 4th night. While some of the things Matpat said in this video can be considered correct and accurate to the modern idea of the story, there's still quite a few things that don't match up with our current perspective. First off, we know the killer didn't use the Golden Freddy suit. We also know that Fredbear's Family Diner was owned by Fazbear Entertainment from the start, and not bought out like Matpat thought. Overall, Matt got about 75% of the story right. Like Scott said, he got the broad strokes, but lost some of the more specific details. But enough about Matpat. What did the community say? Let's start with the obvious. Everyone had to come to terms with the fact that FNAF 2 took place in 1987, and was in fact a prequel. That's about where the agreements ended. While most theorists at the time agreed that the toys were possessed by 5 new kids, opinions have shifted since then. The supposed second missing children incident that happened in 1987 is now dubbed the Dead Children incident by theorists, since they're not really missing. Back then, we didn't have that handy terminology, but opinions about the toys were mostly split into 2 camps of theorists. Those who believed the toys were possessed by a fresh batch of kids, and those who disagreed, stating they were all AI. This debate goes on to this day, even though it started 11 years ago. really says a lot about the community. But while I personally don't find this debate that interesting, one of the early issues theorists had with the franchise is something I'm very adamant about: the question of who stuffed the kids into the animatronics. From frame 1, fans assumed the mysterious killer had done the stuffing of the 5 dead kids himself. But when FNAF 2 came out and a new factor, the puppet, joined the equation, things got a lot more complicated. The early theory space was very interesting for many reasons, but one of the biggest ones was the puppet, or the marionette. Back when FNAF 2 came out, a surprising amount of fans changed opinions, and decided that the 5 original dead kids had been killed by the purple guy, but that it was the puppet that stuffed them into the suits, using the Give Gift Give Life minigame and Foxy Go 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 as evidence. Some even went so far as to say that the puppet had darker motives, and that it caused the 5 new deaths at the 1987 Freddy's. Obviously, now, in 2025, about 99% of the community agrees that it was William Afton, the purple guy, that stuffed his victims into the suits. The books, movie, short stories, and the games themselves all back this up. But this uncertainty about the puppet back when the franchise was just starting is fascinating to me. This was a completely new, weird character, unlike anything we'd seen before. So it made sense that theorists didn't know where it fit into the story. We'll get more into the puppet's lore later, when we get to FNAF 3 and what theorists thought when that game was released. For now, I want to focus on the big source of debate FNAF 2 created: the bite of 87. Back in FNAF 1, the main candidates were Freddy Fazbear and Foxy, as I explained when we were going over that game. But now, the list of potential suspects tripled, including all the toys, all the Wizards, and even Balloon Boy? No joke, every single toy animatronic has evidence to make them the culprit of the bite of 87. But in the days of FNAF 2, all eyes were pointed at one character: Mangle. Mangle was dangerous, had a giant jaw, and aimed for your frontal lobe when jump-scaring you. A relic of old theory discussion that I found out about is that the static Mangle emits was translated by fans into "we've got a little boy, he's got no frontal lobe." I actually made a video about this like a really long time ago, but it's obviously a stock sound, and this is just an example of the fanbase hallucinating. But regardless of that, Mangle felt like the obvious candidate. He was a toy, she was dangerous, and he was created for the 1987 location. This would also explain why the toys were scrapped after FNAF 2. I have a differing opinion on the true identity of the animatronic that did the bite of 87, but for that, watch the video on screen right now. Anyway, while the fanbase grew exponentially after FNAF 2, theorizing did as well. Here you saw the debut of some of the earliest theorists, people like Dawko, 8-Bit Gaming, and even Blackfoot Ferret. Dawko especially posted very frequently about FNAF 2, and was one of the first prehistoric theorists to talk about the shadow animatronics. Oh yeah, those guys. Fans had no idea what these things were when FNAF 2 came out, but as we'll see in FNAF 3, most theorists came to a consensus about their identities. A likely incorrect consensus, but a consensus nonetheless. Overall, FNAF 2 was a very strong opener to the world of FNAF theorizing. A lot of the conclusions theorists came to back then are still argued now, and they're a lot less outdated than the theories from the FNAF 1 days, and I didn't even get to all the content that we got in FNAF 2 and the theories that were made back then. But now, it's time for FNAF 3. As we'll see, this entry was actually quite a bit simpler. First off, FNAF 3's teasers were great. Speculation about the main antagonist, who we now know to be Springtrap, started right away. A huge theory in the teaser days was that FNAF 3's villain would be a character called Salvage, a damaged version of Fredbear, or even an amalgamation of past Fazbear characters. Honestly, not too far off. The teasers also revealed a line hidden in the source code of scottgames.com. 30 years later, what remains? Since pretty much every fan back in 2015 agreed FNAF 1 happened in 1993, they placed this game in the distant future, the fabled year of 2023. Some would later argue against this, but back then, that was the shared idea most fans had. FNAF 3 had a lot less lore reveals than FNAF 2, so I'm going to go over the 3 main ones that really hit the community and got people talking back in March of 2015, when the game came out. Number 1, the minigames, number 2, the endings, and number 3, the truth about the puppet. I won't go over Matpat's FNAF 3 theory in this segment, I will touch on it later though, as it's pretty much a complete timeline and not an actual theory, but I will touch on it later. FNAF 3's minigames worked a bit differently than FNAF 2's. First off, you had the Follow Me minigames that appeared periodically every night, and showed the main Freddy's characters getting dismantled by the purple guy, before their souls turn on him and trap him in a yellow bunny suit, foreshadowing his return as Springtrap. Fans realized that purple guy becoming Springtrap after dying meant he couldn't be Phone Guy, since that guard died in the office the week before Mike Schmidt. So FNAF 3 basically took Purple Phone theory out back, definitively debunking it. They also agree that Follow Me likely happened after FNAF 1, at least from what I can tell. Which is interesting, considering there's still some disagreement about that now. Then, there were the Happiest Day minigames. These ones were extremely hidden, but somehow the fans managed to find all of them in under 24 hours. These minigames were BB's Air Adventure, Mangle's Quest, Chica's Party, Stage 01, and the Shadow Bonnie glitch minigame. The first three didn't really spawn much debate, but Stage 01 and the Shadow Bonnie arcade got theorists scrambling for answers. Stage 01 depicts a yellow bear and yellow rabbit animatronics, which theorists correctly concluded were not only the past forms of Golden Freddy and Springtrap, but also the legendary Fredbear and Yellow Bonnie, or Golden Bonnie as the fans called him back then. This, coupled with the Shadow Bonnie minigame, got theorists thinking. What if Shadow Freddy and RWQFSFASXC were actually ghostly imprints of employees killed by these suits? FNAF 3 taught us all about Springlock suits and their many dangers. So what if this was what happened to the victims of the multiple simultaneous Springlock failures Phone Guy mentions? It all made sense, back then at least. And this theory has become soft canon for a large majority of the fandom to this day. Finally, there was the Happiest Day minigame itself, the finale of the good ending, where he plays the puppet in a birthday party, supposedly helping the 5 dead kids move on. We'll get back to this in a minute. On to the endings. FNAF 3 was the first game to give the player a choice. Free the souls of the dead kids through the Happiest Day minigames, or just power for your knights and leave them behind. Take notes, Toby Fox, Scott beat you to inventing games with multiple endings. Anyway, if you didn't play the minigames and instead left the souls restless, you'd get a screen saying bad ending with the 4 main animatronics with their eyes lit up, and a 5th head in the background, Golden Freddy. These lights on the animatronics would later become crucial to a theory popularized by Matpat all about the soul, or souls, inside Golden Freddy. But that's a topic for another day. Then, there was the good ending. The same screen, but with the animatronic heads extinguished. They had moved on. Immediately, the biggest question was obvious. Which ending was canon? Scott Cawthon never clarified. Only in an interview with Dawko years later did he say it was, quote, complicated. But since FNAF 3 felt like the end of the saga, most theorists said that the good ending was canon. But the shadow of Springtrap in the final newspaper begged to differ. Was the franchise really over? Or was there going to be a continuation? Fans were about to find out later that same year. And finally, the puppet. The big bad of the story, or just a misunderstood hero? I'ma be honest, it's hard to gauge what fans thought. At first they saw it in the phantom puppet camera and realized it was in the building, probably trying to help the dead kids move on. But then there was the question of whether it had stuffed the kids into the suits itself, thus causing the tragedy, or if that was the purple guy. Matpat, in his FNAF 3 timeline, blamed the puppet for the stuffing of the MCI kids, but the idea a lot of fans had back then was that the marionette did this to give the souls a second chance, or just a chance at revenge. However, the Happiest Day minigame showing the puppet helping the children move on painted a different picture. Overall, the puppet would remain a huge center of confusion in the fanbase, up until FNAF 6. But fans still had a while to go until that. FNAF 3's theories evolved even more from FNAF 2's. Beliefs around the game have stayed pretty much the same, except for the year it takes place, with the debate now being split between 2015 and 2023. But overall, the ideas have stayed pretty similar. With that, we've gone over the main community ideas that fans and theorists had when these 3 games launched. Things have changed, but if Scott Cawthon himself said we solved everything, should we go back? Should we keep trying to theorize about these games? FNAF 2 particularly, being the most complex game of the original trilogy, is a mess to theorize about nowadays. I've made several videos about this game, and all of them were super out there compared to my normal content, and honestly, I'm not very satisfied with them. I think the fanbase's theories back then were also really expansive and way too complicated to go over in depth today. Overall, I think that since Scott said we got the games almost completely right, we should listen. Obviously, we can still find small clues here and there, but trying to rewrite the story by swapping around dates, adding character arcs, and hunting for secrets that aren't there doesn't really help us a lot. It just keeps us stuck in the same loop we've been in for a decade. I think that Scott saying certain things we said about FNAF 2 and 3 were right, like the 5 new dead kids, Fredbears, the year being 2023, etc., are worth bringing up. It keeps us from asking the same age-old questions over and over again. Revisionism like this is very common in the theory space. That's fine, it's a way of pushing new ideas. But from now on, I'll be avoiding discussion of these 3 games in particular. Thanks for watching this retrospective of the origins of FNAF theorizing. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment if you want me to talk about the big, unsolvable game that is FNAF 4 next. Stay safe, and keep on theorizing.